Developments now coming in. Ukraine's military is now saying that it has shot down a Russian aircraft. That's the update that's coming in. And this is what we were discussing a short while ago, that the option left with Ukraine is but to stand up to itself and defend as far as the invasion takes place. Zaka continues to be with us. Zaka, this is what we were discussing. The option are not too many. You have to stand up for yourself and defend yourself. And now the update coming in from the Ukraine military is that they've shot down a Russian aircraft.
All right, so what the information that we have is that this is a claim by the Ukrainian military. They are saying that their air defense shot down one Russian fighter aircraft in the east. Now, they haven't identified which part of the east. Is it in Donbass? Is it somewhere else? It could likely be in the Donbass region, because that's where for weeks now there had been a build-up from both sides, from the Russian side as well as from the Ukrainian side. But I think what this shows is, one, the Ukrainian military is also trying to send out a message that, look, folks, we can very well defend ourselves. We have the military capability to stand up to Russia and put up a fight and defend our independence. So that's one part. So one part is clearly messaging. The other is also to show out that they have the capability. Air defense is not, is not technology that's available with all countries. Clearly, Ukraine has got access to its to this air defense capability, and that's how, according to this particular claim, it's managed to shoot down this Russian fighter jet. Now, we don't know whether this, or what make of a jet this was, whether this was regular Russian aircraft that were flying sorties around that region, or were they logistical in nature. We don't know any of that. But what the Ukrainian military has said is that they have claimed that they have shot down a Russian fighter jet in the eastern part of Ukraine. So I think there are two sets of messagings here. One is, of course, sending out a message to the rest of the world that they have the capability to defend themselves. And two, it also gives you a window, it gives you a peek into the capabilities that Ukraine has when it comes to its air defense. Remember, the entire airspace has now been shut. The country's under martial law. You're seeing air siren raids go off across the length and breadth of Ukraine. So this is going to be, from the looks of it, a long-drawn, protracted war between a small country trying to defend itself. It has no option but to, and a big country trying to shock and awe the smaller one into submission, if you will.
But Zaka, even as you have Ukraine claiming victory, at least as of now, we don't know what the ground situation is. The invasion still continues to evolve with each passing minute, and currently happening on three sides, as we were discussing earlier. Now you have Belarus also that has joined the Russian troops.
All right, just to put this into perspective for viewers who are tuning in right now, Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, went on state television about 4 hours or so ago and said he's launching a limited military operation in Donbass. Now, this was seen by many as the culmination of weeks of military build-up. There were close to 200,000 troops on the eastern side that Russia had amassed. So this was seen in a sense as the culmination of everything that American intel, for example, had predicted would happen. But now what is happening is, across the length and breadth of Ukraine, whether it's in western cities, in northern cities, and of course in southern cities like Odessa and Mariupol, you are seeing a three-pronged attack by Russian troops. In the east, of course, like we've been discussing for days now, there's been this massive buildup of troops. The Belarusian troops in the northern part, remember, who for the last 2 weeks were engaged in a joint military operation, command and control exercises with their Russian counterparts. And every time Alexander Lukashenko, the Belarusian president, was asked about this, he simply brushed it off, saying these are routine joint military exercises. Now, Belarusian troops are walking in across the border from the northern side of Ukraine into Ukrainian territory. And then you have the Russian naval fleet, which is stationed in the Black Sea in the south, attacking cities like Odessa and Mariupol. So this is a three-pronged shock and awe approach taken by Vladimir Putin and the Russian troops into try and blitzkrieg their way through Ukraine. The question, like I said, is twofold. Ukraine does not have much of a choice but to stand up for itself and defend itself, because this is, for all practical purposes, an invasion on a sovereign country. And two, more importantly, huge question marks for the United States, for Britain, for Germany, France, even countries like Poland, which is now a NATO ally in the most immediate vicinity of Ukraine. What do they do? Right now, sanctions are the only sort of measure that have been announced. Yes, some defensive military equipment have been transferred to the Ukrainians over the last 3 or 4 weeks, but that is simply not going to cut it. If you need Vladimir Putin to change his pattern of behavior, then you need to be seen as responding militarily. And that's a big, big call because let's face it, at least in the United States, after the war in Iraq and after the just concluded war in Afghanistan, which many say was a big foreign policy catastrophe for Joe Biden, is he in the mood to send American troops into Ukraine to fight this war? Right now, politically, I don't think so. But then the question is also, does he have a choice? Because if he doesn't do it now, then it firmly establishes Vladimir Putin as numero uno. Not just in the power games, not just in the geopolitics, but it sends out a message that he and he alone has single-handedly stopped the onward march or the eastward march of NATO. And that I don't think is something that Biden or any of the other Western leaders would want to brook.
Zaka, but I also want to just go back a little bit. You know, as you were rightly pointing out, that there had been multiple comments that came in from Joe Biden where he said that an invasion is imminent. Sometimes he gave a timeline saying days and weeks. But there were also conflicting reports on the ground that possibly there is a de-escalation that is taking place and this is just possibly a drill. Do you think some sort of communication and understanding the ground situation has gone wrong?
Well, it's clearly, you know, two different sets of countries wanting two different things. And clearly there have been multiple points of engagement. I think Blinken's met with Lavrov quite a few times in the last 2 months. In fact, they were supposed to meet this week, and the only reason it got cancelled was earlier this week, Vladimir Putin recognizing Donetsk and Luhansk as independent republics. But let's be very clear about this, Ridhima. This is a playbook that Putin has used in Crimea, notably in 2014. Yeah. He's used this in Georgia in 2008. He's used this in Chechnya. Much before that, much before he became president, in fact, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when he was prime minister of Russia, he used these similar tactics in Chechnya. So this is a Vladimir Putin playbook, which we've seen for the last 20 years. Unfortunately for the West, the response from the West, whether it was Bush as president, whether it was Obama as president, Trump as president, and now Joe Biden as president, it's the same sort of copybook templated response, which is to try and engage with him diplomatically, sanctions and more sanctions, some defensive military equipment to the countries in question, and that's it. Ultimately, what Putin manages to do is change the rules on the ground, change maps on the ground, as he did with Crimea, as he did with Georgia. He's now doing that in Donetsk and Luhansk. The way Vladimir Putin sees it, this is part of a much bigger, political, military, economic, cultural project for him. He sees all of these, countries that broke away from the USSR when the Soviet Union fell, whether it's the countries in the Caucasus, Latvia, Lithuania, etc., or whether it is countries like Ukraine or Belarus, or even all the way to the Islamic republics of Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, etc. He sees all of them as part of the great Russian Empire. Here is a man, a former KGB agent, who thinks that the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union was a big, giant conspiracy by America and by capitalism to destroy the great Russian motherland as he sees it. So he's on this historical reconstruction project, as you were. And what would it take to get him to stop? I think the only thing conventionally, militarily, to look at it, what would get him to stop was if the US and NATO were able to show that they have 10 times more firepower than Russia does, that there will be a huge cost to pay if Russia indulges in these kind of war games. Unfortunately, for the last 20 years, we haven't seen that from NATO, the ability and the willingness to show that it can impose costs on the Kremlin. We haven't seen demonstrable sort of evidence of that in the last 20 years.
Zaka, we'll continue this conversation.